mutually exclusive, that if you put a young brain in an environment where we've seen its evolutionary mandate is to adapt to that environment, if that environment is now faster and brighter and noisier, more fast-paced, the young brain will adapt to that, such that when it goes to school, when the child goes to school and they're asked to live in 3 dimensions and access all 5 senses, but everything's much slower, less dramatic, less exciting, that they will get attentional problems, and then they'll be given this drug. Again, I think this is the kind of issue that we do need to explore. So what could be then the effects of gaming? A fragmented attention where the screen draws your attention to it, but then you're busy looking at many different aspects of a complex visual image, you're reacting, you're hypertexting. So having drawn your attention, it's then fragmented, and with a shorter attention span as you jump from one thing to the next thing to the next within the experience that you're having. Now, what about something else? That if you're playing a game and someone is dead, that you kill them, unlike in real life, they can become undead. You'll recall at the beginning I said that probably most people listening to me talk here have passed an exam, and that it will be impossible to reverse that. You can't unpass the exam. But in a computer game, you can reverse things. You can make someone undead. So therefore, if you are playing a computer game and you get into the habit that actions do not have consequences, then will that change your attitude to risks? Might it make you more reckless? Well, if you talk about risk-taking to a neuroscientist, what they will do is always point to neurological cases where, because of brain damage, the patient presents with increased recklessness. And the first person that did this was in the 1860s. There's a man who's earned his page in history called Phineas Gage, and he lived in the States, in Vermont. He was the foreman on a railway gang, and it was his job to use a big rod called a tamping iron to push down explosives so that they could then get rid of all the rocks and the debris that were enabling them then to lay the railway track going from the east to the west coast. And one day in 1860 or thereabouts, what happened was there was a premature explosion such that the tamping iron, this formidable rod, was driven through the frontal part of Phineas's brain. I'm going to show you a picture of him. If anyone is squeamish, I suggest you might close your eyes for a second, because it is pretty gory. So as you might have imagined, surely this is a rather sad story, that clearly such a severe injury would have so damaged Phineas, if not killed him, that why am I telling you this story? Well, it wasn't the case. Amazingly, after a few moments, he regained consciousness and could see and walk and talk just fine. And these being the heartless days when there was no provision for people with brain injuries, he actually went back to work. And it was only as the weeks turned into months that his colleagues noticed a serious difference. Whilst he could walk and talk and see and hear, they did notice a more subtle difference as the weeks unfolded, and that he became very short-tempered, rather like a child, but above all, very reckless. Not good if you're working with explosives. In the end, he actually had to leave his job and became a fairground freak, where he earned his living by showing off his wound. But nonetheless, he paid neuroscience a very great contribution by showing us that this frontal part of the brain might in some way be linked to taking risks. Now, what do we know about this frontal part of the brain? Well, in humans, it occupies a very large area. It's 33% of the human brain, but only 17% in chimps, and by the time you get to cats, that's only 3%. And as you can see, it's right at the front of the brain, and we know from other cases of shrapnel damage during the wars that when it's damaged, you get this so-called frontal syndrome, which includes increased recklessness. Now, interestingly enough, there's other situations where the prefrontal cortex isn't working as fully as in normal cases. One is in people who are very heavy, who have a high body mass index. That's to say they are heavy relative to their height. And you can see from this paper here that in such individuals, the heavier they are, the less active, as shown by their metabolic activity, the less active their prefrontal cortex. And as we're aware, in the West at least, obesity is a huge growing problem, not least related, of course, to the sedentary lifestyle of kids sitting in front of the screen. What's very interesting is people who are obese, who are heavy, are more reckless, as shown here in this gambling task. So we know there's a link between an underactive prefrontal cortex, recklessness, and obesity. Another condition is schizophrenia, as you can see here, where the patient is lying on their back and their nose is up in the air, and on the right, the frontal part of the brain, as shown by the arrow, is less active than in someone that's normal. What do we know about schizophrenia? Well, contrary to popular belief, it's not a split personality. More, it's a split from reality. The person behaves in a different way, rather like a child, actually, and there are many features in common. So a schizophrenic person is very easily distracted by the outside world. They feel that things are imploding in on them, that people can see inside their heads and their thoughts. They have a short attention span because they're constantly reacting to everything around them. They cannot see one thing in terms of another. They are indeed like children, like my little brother was, who didn't understand what it meant, out, out, brief candle. He thought it was literally a candle. If you say to a schizophrenic perp, there's an English proverb, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. If you ask what that means, a schizophrenic person will say, well, if your house is made of glass and I throw a stone at it, your house will break. And finally, in both cases, schizophrenics have an underactive prefrontal cortex, as we've just seen, as do children. What's very interesting, what's very interesting in children is that the prefrontal cortex is only fully active in late teenage years, early 20s. It's one of those very famous scenarios where individual development reflects evolution, or as people used to say, where ontogeny reflects phylogeny. So let's think then about what all these different cases could have in common that link an underactivity in the prefrontal cortex. Well, anyone who eats knows the consequences of eating, but the thrill of the food for someone who is obese has trumped the consequences they will put on weight. Anyone who gambles knows the consequences of gambling, but the thrill of the roulette wheel or the roll of the dice or the horse past the finishing post, that excitement trumps the consequences. You may lose all your money. And the clue comes perhaps from schizophrenia. Here's a very famous series of paintings of a cat by a schizophrenic patient. This was at the beginning of his illness, and bottom right is towards the end. Now, if you look at top left, anyone would recognize that as a cat, no problem. But by the time you get to bottom right, no one would recognize that as a cat. What I'd like to suggest is that what we've seen here is a transition from cognitive, from something meaningful, through to the purely sensory. So could it be that what these very different conditions have in common is that whether you're a child, or you're obese, or you're a gambler, or you're a schizophrenic, the whole issue is that now you are in the here and now. Now you're in a world where the senses, the input of the moment, is more important than the consequences. If that's so, then how does that impact on computer games? Well, this is in the Daily Telegraph, a British quality newspaper some time ago, and you can see the headline here: children who love video games have brains like gamblers. And what they found was, and here's the reference, that in this particular area of the brain, here, the so-called ventral striatum, or nucleus accumbens, this area is enlarged in people that are playing computer games a lot, rather like in the brains of gamblers. So could there be a link? Well, what could that link be? Let's think about it. When I was giving a talk now about 18 months ago to a journalist, I said, could this be a world where people say yuck and wow and yuck and wow, and are just living in the moment without any consequences? Because I talked quickly, she misheard it and wrote yucca wow, which is of course a meaningless word. But nonetheless, this started a craze such that there were 75,000 hits on Google within 24 hours, and someone actually was entrepreneurial enough to decide to take up the domain name and market t-shirts. And you can see here the first church of Yucca wow. Anyway, the whole point is this: breezy people into a world with no consequences. A world with no consequences. Is that the world of the gamer? Well, let's think about it. It's a very exciting world, as we've seen, where you are roused. Many find it addictive, and by definition, most would find it rewarding. Now, what do we know about these conditions in brain terms? Well, there is one chemical messenger that helps with all these different mindsets, with being excited, with being addictive, and indeed with reward. it is not the chemical for addiction or for reward, but it puts the brain into a certain state that we're still trying to understand that actually relates to these conditions. And that chemical is called dopamine. So what do we know about dopamine? Well, we know that it comes from a very basic part of the brain, and it does many things. For example, it's important in the control of movement, as is seen sadly when it's deficient in Parkinson's disease. But we also know that all drugs, all psychotropic drugs, irrespective of their chemical targets, will be associated finally with the release of dopamine and addiction. We also know that reward processes are some way linked to the release of dopamine, and finally we know that dopamine inhibits the prefrontal cortex. So where does that place us? Well, we can imagine therefore with gaming a continuous cycle where intense stimulation of the screen gives a very fast, excited response. So therefore you're highly aroused and dopamine is released as a result of your arousal levels. This is similar to reward-seeking addictive behavior, so more dopamine is released. This then inhibits the prefrontal cortex. And we've seen that the prefrontal cortex is associated with conditions, schizophrenia, obesity, and childhood. And in turn, that these conditions have one thing in common, that there is a drive for sensation, for the immediate thrill of the moment, over cognition, over consequences. And so that means a screen, offering as it does, a fast-paced, literal world, will be more appealing than the real world, and therefore we will have a vicious cycle. So that's just one model. And just to show that, again, these are having long-term changes in the brain, this is a recent paper come out from China showing long-term changes in the brains of adolescent people who've got internet addiction disorder. Finally, let's look at search engines. Again, a separate issue entirely. One could ask the question, if you were trying to understand something, let's take a word like honor, which is a very subtle word, it's an abstract word, it's something surely that is hard to show as an image. When I Googled on honour, and remember this is British Google, the first thing I got was the Queen, and then various other images. Now if you showed this to someone from Mars, they would have no idea really what honour was. And in order to understand honour, you surely have to see it in different contexts, you have to see it at work, you don't just see pictures. So in order to truly understand what it is, images are not going to be enough. So what are the effects of search engines? Well, it's very hard to convey abstract concepts like honour, just as it is to convey ideas like out, brief candle, or people who live in glass houses mustn't throw stones. That's the first problem. The next is the one I alluded to earlier when we talked about mental agile processing, as in IQ tests, and understanding the meaning, the significance of something, of seeing one thing in terms of something else. For example, this is an old PlayStation advert for rescuing the noble Princess Yukihime. In a world of darkness and magic, power-hungry warlords battle one another for the chaos. The noble Princess Yukihime is kidnapped. But I bet you don't care about her. You don't care about Princess Yukihime, not in the same way, and I'm sure many of you in Russia have read Tolstoy, how you would care about Princess Maria. Why? Well, Princess Maria has a past, a present, and a future, just like you. And she has friends, just like you. And therefore, she has a significance and a meaning because she has a context of her life. She has a life story, just like you. And that is why you carry on turning the pages. Not because to stare at a page is exciting. It is because of the images it conjures up in your imagination and the significance that the people have that keeps you reading the book, because they have a significance that here the Princess Yukihime probably doesn't have, because she has no context other than that she's something to rescue. Just to show that I'm not alone in these worries, Eric Schmidt, who's indeed the chairman now, he was the CEO of Google, I worry that the level of interrupt, the sort of overwhelming rapidity of information notice, is in fact affecting cognition, it's affecting deeper thinking. I still believe that sitting down and reading a book is the best way to really learn something, and I worry that we're losing that. So what is thinking? Let's finally think about thinking. And here is my third conclusion and final one, that harnessing 21st century technology is important because we could now promote original thinking, namely creativity. Well, what do we mean by this? Well, let's think about people who live for the moment. Here we have people who, in a world stripped of all cognitive content,